So let me add Brian to the stream. Hello, Brian. So Brian is a developer advocate for Snyk, a software engineer with many, many years of experience. He also is a regular speaker at conferences, and he's here to show us how to break into Java web apps. I can also see that he's a Taekwondo master, so if you ever try to break into his web app, he'll probably kick your butt. But yeah, Brian, I guess you can introduce yourself, and then we can kick off the presentation.
All right, that's great, man. Thank you for having me. And as you can see, while we are, how do you say that, still socially distanced, I am in a bar over here because that's one of the places you normally have during a conference, right? Like afterwards, you have these talks in the bar, like how did you do, or what did you do, or going deeper into kind of projects. Unfortunately, not today, but I'm very pleased to be here. So thank you for being here. And yeah, let's kick it off. By the way, I am a Taekwondo master. I will not kick your butt. It's only when we are in the dojang I will do my best, not outside, of course. So yeah, let's get going.
Yep.
I need to share my screen for that. Suppose
so.
Share screen, and you probably see my screen over here.
This is the one. Yep.
Yeah, cool.
All right.
But
floor is yours.
So, okay, thank you so much. I'm going to start with a bold statement. We developers basically suck at security. Let's be honest. I mean, how many times you are developing a Java application or whatever application, doesn't really matter, are you actually thinking about security? I mean, in many cases, we are thinking about how do we get this feature in, and how do we keep our project maintainable and scalable and these kind of things, right? But are you actually thinking about the security reasoning behind it as well? That's why we need to talk about this word, DevSecOps. And the first time I saw this word, it felt to me like yet another buzzword. The buzzword like, well, just pull in some other words and you can cross it off your buzzword bingo card together with Bitcoins and AI, and we have the full-blown party. But actually, DevSecOps is a real thing. I mean, most of us are doing DevOps, right? We're having developers and operations, and we try to tear down walls, and we connect the two together to make sure that we basically made sure that we deliver faster, even better and stronger. And we made these cycles kind of, well, smaller. Normally I will ask the crowd, like, how many of you actually do DevOps? And then not everybody will show up and say, well, we'll turn up his hand. But the point is, if I asked many developers, like, if you're a developer and you are with your team, you're creating stuff, are you also the ones that need to put it into production? And when something is wrong, it turns back on you and you need to fix it and you need to push to production again. So basically, you own it. If you do that, you kind of do DevOps. So be aware that DevOps is not just following the step of the DevOps handbook and only then you're doing DevOps. No, DevOps is more of a guideline. But what we try to do with DevOps is indeed making sure that we do not have strict departments, development operations. Well, the point is, as I asked before, or as I stated before, that in many cases we do not care about security that much, right? If you see that security is at the end of the line, let's test it over there and we'll see, right? But that means that it's a showstopper in the end. Why not get that security part, put it in the middle, like we did over here, and make sure that it's both part of the dev part and the ops part? So basically, security is a first-class citizen in the mind of a developer. That's what we're trying to achieve. All right. That sounds very fluffy, doesn't it? Anyway, first of all, normally people will introduce themselves, so I will do too. My name is Brian. I'm a developer advocate and software engineer for a company called Snyk. Snyk is a company based in many countries, but we're based worldwide, with our head office in London at this point, but we have offices in Tel Aviv and Boston as well, and Ottawa, and many other places have people working. But what we do is we try to create developer tooling that make security a bit less harder for a developer to incorporate it in their process. So we're not a pure security company. We're not only doing research. We do research, but not only. But we're creating tooling to make security easier to implement in your development lifecycle. Well, as you can see, I do some stuff for the community. You see that little juke over there. That is the logo of the Utrecht Java user group. That is one of the local user groups here in the Netherlands, where I'm based. I'm a co-member, or I'm a co-lead over there, and working on a speaker incubator program, which I'm very proud of. On the far right, you will see the VJUG logo, which is the virtual Java user group. And that virtual Java user group is just like this virtual. We have talks, and we try to share it with the world without the boundaries of time zones and location. In the middle, you see my DevSecOps, which is a community that is not ecosystem, not bound to an ecosystem, but we're focusing on application security. How as a developer can we be more secure in many ways, like when we need to configure a cloud stuff, when we need to build our application, when we need to deploy our application. How can we think of security as much as we think of maintainability and scalability? Last but not least, I'm a Oracle Groundbreaker ambassador, which I appreciate a lot as recognition for my development work. Anyway, let's talk stuff, right? So DevSecOps. I bring it as we need to talk about it, but what are actually the problems we're trying to solve here? Let's put them line to line. First of all, say 10 years ago, I worked for a government agency. After that, I worked for a bank and some security, some insurance companies. But what you see over there is they are very conservative, and not many times they are, well, at that time, they were not very agile. Let me keep it to that. They release basically, say 3 times a year. That government agency literally released 3, maybe 4 times a year if there was no issue. But if you look nowadays at, for instance, e-commerce platforms, or at least platforms that are commercially bound, you'll see that instead of 3 times a year, we are speeding things up. We might even release multiple times a day. But what we see is that every time I try to do this, I have this manager tapping on my back like, I want this feature now. We need to do this to get before our competitors. That's the way it works, because, yeah, if we release this earlier than our competitors, we might have an advantage towards them, right? The point is, in many cases, we do take shortcuts to get this done, and we call it a POC. But we lack the security knowledge, and we leave that behind because, yeah, what can happen? But as we see, is that the lack of security knowledge is not only here. It's a lack of focus through the whole app life cycle. Because, as you know, for many companies, although we try to utilize DevOps as good as possible and tear down these walls between developers and operations and make the team as a whole responsible for that, what you see that is in many companies that security expertise is still siloed. It's still at the end of the line, end of the pipeline. There is probably a security team that tries to review your stuff once in a while, tries to do a pen test, and you're waiting for that to get released. Or not, you release anyway, but once in a while you get pen tested. But what it means is that you do not have that feedback cycle back into your application development lifecycle very soon. It will take some time. And the point is, if it takes some time because it's mission critical, you have a kind of a battle between the development team and the security team. That security team will not release something because there is some security issue. They basically say, no, that's how you feel it, or that's how I felt it as a developer, and we need to redo it. I mean, it cost me 3 weeks to develop that feature. We tested out and we were just in time for that deadline, but then the security people said no. That's how I felt in many cases, and that's how a lot of developers feel in many cases. But the point is, in the end, we do need to take care of that, because we do not want to be that company that releases customer valuable data or PII data out in the open and be the next headline in the news that customer data is compromised on your behalf, right? That's something we do not want. We want to create cool stuff and we want to push it out as soon as possible, preferably with newer frameworks, if that is applicable. All right. But how bad is the situation? Well, I will give you a small example, a very small example. Who have you heard of the company called Equifax? And probably some of you folks heard of it. Well, they were in the news in 2017 because of a breach. And I will not go into the company, I will go into the breach. Because afterwards they do an amazing job having security, having high standards in security. But at that point they had an issue. And we can say, like, who knew about Equifax like in 2015? Probably only if you're based in the US. But outside of the US, nobody heard of it because it's a crediting company within the US and they were big in the news because of this breach. You can say that is good marketing, but because everybody knows your name, but some people might disagree on that, right? Anyway, the point was that they were using third-party libraries like we do, like every one of us does. They were using a somewhat outdated version of Apache Struts. At that point, they didn't know that there was a vulnerability in it. And basically, that vulnerability was already found, disclosed, and there was already a newer version out. But if you do not pay attention to updating these libraries and making sure you are at the very last version, or at least the fixed version that doesn't have a particular vulnerability, and this was a high severity vulnerability, you might be in trouble. And Equifax was in the crossfire because basically somebody found out that Apache Struts 2 at that point had a arbitrary code execution vulnerability and were just simply shooting at every endpoint on the internet. And unfortunately, Equifax was hit, was in that script or whatever they used. And they found out they were having this library, and they slightly moved in, snoop around for maybe months, and in the end, they released 143 million records of U.S. customers. And that's hard because then you're in the news in a bad way, and at least you don't want it. You want to focus on your business logic. Cool. Let me go to that breach right away. I think that is cool. I have some other slides as well, but let me first go to that breach. You have some better understanding on how that breach works. So I have a Java application over here. And as you can see, this Java application runs on my Heroku instance. Let me make sure that it still runs because after 15 minutes of inactivity, it will close down, of course. Anyway, what this application does is not really important, but it uses the same Apache Struts library. That is what's important. So let me go back to my terminal and make sure that I am in the right directory. No, this is for a Spring application. Then I need to do this one. Exactly. And I will show you what the vulnerability is and how, in which way it was actually executed. As you can see, I'm showing you a header. Actually, I'm showing you a content type. And this content type was used within Apache Struts, within a call towards an Apache Struts library application with that vulnerable library to execute arbitrary code. As you probably see, this is a very weird content type, right? Well, in a nutshell, what happened is that if you do a call with this content type towards that vulnerable library, it will see that this content type is basically bogus. It's not a real content type, and it goes in some sort of exceptional flow. Let's call it like that. And in that exceptional flow, you were able, for some reason, you were able to utilize OGNL, which is the expression language, the object graph navigational language, the expression language within Apache Struts. And with that expression language, you are allowed to interfere with objects that are already there, maybe access the getter or the setter, for instance, like that, but also to create new instances of an object. And with creating a new instance of that object is what we see here. You see that they are creating a new process builder. And all good Java developers know that with a process builder, we can create a new process that works somewhat where. And that process, we basically feed it a bash, and that bash is fed an arbitrary command. So what we try to do here, we try to create a process builder that calls the bash on that machine and feed it a command. And some routing from an input stream to an output stream to show you the stuff. Let me show you how this works. So I've got the Heroku application over here. So let me just show you the struts Heroku. What you can see here, what I'm doing here, and I will cut it out for you. What I'm trying to do here is I'm using that header I just showed you, so that fake content type, and I substitute that word command for the env command. And as we know in Linux, if we type env, it will show us the environment variables. And I will do a curl -v -x get towards my my Heroku application, feeding it this header. Let's try this. And I think it's down already. Let me just check if it's up again. It almost looks like a Twitch presentation where things go wrong, right? Oh, and you see it's back. It took a while, but you see it's back. And what you see over here is that it gives me at least partially, it prints out the environment variables on my Heroku machine. You see what my Java options are. You see where my Java home is situated on this Heroku instance, /app/.jdk. We need this later for another exploit. But as you can see, if I can call the env variable or the env command, I can also create a new file, or maybe delete a file, or go into a file, read it, or alter a file. I basically have control over that shell, over that bash. And that's a problem, because now people can just execute code on your machine and you have no notice of it unless you are actively monitoring it. That is basically what happens in a nutshell to that Apache Struts library. Right? Okay, let me get back to the presentation. So what happened is they were using something from somebody else. They're basically using a open source framework. And we can say how many people are using Apache Struts nowadays. That's not the point. They were using an open source framework, and probably there are still a bunch of you using it because we have to maintain legacy code. And I will show you that this is not just particularly Apache Struts, but this was just a famous hack. As this is your application, this big yellow ball, how much of this application would you think is actually the code you specifically write? Probably it's something like this. This is the code you write versus the code you put into that jar that you put into production. If we're talking about jars, it can be ears or wars or whatever system you're using. It doesn't matter, because we're depending a lot on third-party, mostly open source frameworks and libraries to make our life a bit easier. And that's fair. We do not want to create yet another CRUD repository or yet another REST endpoint, or do the marshalling and unmarshalling of JSON or something like that, because we want to focus on business value. And that's a fair point, because that is where we as a developer within a company make the difference. So think about it. How much do you value your own code? Because many of you probably have things like code review in place, or pair programming, or at least some sort of mechanism to take care of your own code. But that's just that little purple ball in the middle. That big yellow ball is the whole application where you as a DevOps team are responsible for. How do you work with your dependencies and the libraries you pull in with Gradle or Maven or maybe even Ant? Think about that one. So, giving you just an example to see how much that is. I can show you some drawings, of course, but I have a Node.js application, and it's also as a Java developer, it's always easy to make fun of Node.js applications, right? You see, this application has 19 lines of code and 2 direct dependencies, right? 2 direct. So we pull in 2 dependencies, but as we know, dependencies have dependencies and maybe have 3rd layer, 4th, 5th layer dependencies. One dependency can pull in many because, well, it might be a complete framework like AWS SDK. Just take a moment for yourself and think, how many dependencies will there be in total? Just guess. Don't answer, just guess. Well, many people think Node.js and Node.js or NPM downloads the internet twice because we have an amount of packages that is insane. But it's not that bad. It's only 19 dependencies in total. The million-dollar question over here is, how many lines of code are there actually in that application that I put into on my production machine? It's just a bit shy of 200,000 lines of code. And we optimize the hell out of these 19 lines of code that we do. We reviewed it, but the other 119,000, 99,000, whatever lines of code, how do you take care of them? Well, it's easy to make fun of a Node.js application, right? And we're at a Java conference, so let's do a Spring serverless example. And this is a snippet of the code. We created this demo application, and in total, it had 222 lines of code. We were downloading we had 5 direct dependencies in our manifest. These 5 direct dependencies, as you see, Spring Framework and Spring Framework, Framework Cloud, Spring Framework Data, whatever, and Amazon AWS SDK, again, for Java. It turned out that we have 54 dependencies in total. Okay, that's a lot, but how many lines of code do I actually put into production? Over 400,000, just a bit shy of half a million lines of code you put in production. And you are responsible for the whole shebang, not just the little purple dot, right? So again, think about, how are you handling these dependencies? How do we take care of them? And well, I always get these things like, but we are not using parts of it. First of all, are you sure? Because static analysis tools can do a bunch of stuff, but do they also take into account the whole? Well, Spring Framework, for instance, does a lot of reflection. Do they take these things into account? But even more, furthermore, if that thing is already in, that dependency is already in, you give your fellow developers more or less the reason to use it, right? Oh, it's already there, I can use it. Or not. So you have to have some sort of strategy on that. Okay. So what we want to say with this is that open source usage has exploded over the last decade, basically. And we are using a ton of it. And that is good because open source rules. Open source rules. So we might have some open source developers over here and some maintainers of popular libraries. I'm one of them, like doing some stuff on many libraries, not a big contributor to a specific one, but we have contributed. But as I said, it's you and me are the same developers for these open source packages as the developers that run on the proprietary applications. So that means we might make mistakes, right? So, and if there is a mistake that turns into, and it's found and turns into a security vulnerability, for a open source package that is heavily used, like, well, name them, something in the Apache Commons things, or something within the Quarkus or Spring framework that is heavily used, that means that if there is a problem over there, we have a potential of many victims that are using it, and an attack factor that might go up exponentially. So we have to be careful of that again. Some statistics. I will get through these quite quickly. As you see, that this is between January 2018 and 2019, but just to show you how much these packages, how much packages were indexed in both the npm and the Maven repositories, and you see over here that npm is the clear winner in January 2019. Later last year, they moved over the 1 million mark. But still, if you look at Maven Central as a benchmark, it's a growth over 100,000 packages. So that means they are getting more and more packages every single year. And if we look at vulnerabilities that are disclosed each year, well, you see these numbers are growing as well. And unfortunately, Maven Central, or the packages within Maven Central, we are the clear winner. But the point is, I was talking about dependencies and transitive dependencies. You see that in many cases, and let's just get Maven Central out and pick NPM out, because these are the two largest ecosystems with third-party libraries compared to the others. You see that in not many cases, it's the package you pull in. It's the package that you pull in has another dependencies that might have an issue. That might be a very small, tiny library, and it's used just for a particular reason, for marshalling JSON, for instance, if you're using Spring. And most of the time, these vulnerabilities are in these indirect dependencies. So we need to dig into that dependency tree to see how much of a problem it is. And we might be upgrading that top level one or switching one out if needed. If we ask OS maintainer how confident they are about their own security, 63% says, I'm kind of confident. And I'm kind of confident as well. But how much do you trust kind of confident for somebody you don't know while we are reviewing the code of our peers? Intensively, hopefully. And then we can do something like this, like we ask people, like, who is actually responsible for security? Well, most of the people say it's a shared responsibility between security teams and operations and developers. But at least 81% of the respondents in this survey said developers need to take their fair share. So we, as software developers, we need to think about security, and we need to have something in place or strategy or whatever to make security just as important as scalability, maintainabilities, and all the abilities we have in this world. We can go on and on, like, how do you find about vulnerabilities? As 27% says, I probably won't. Fair enough. And this one is an interesting fact. If we have a library, how much time in general does it take for a library that was totally free of vulnerabilities, for a vulnerability to be found and disclosed? What is the median? So in general, how much time does it take? Well, it can take over years. The median in this case was 2.5 years. So if you have an application in production, which is a legacy application you need to maintain, but actually you do not dare to touch it because so many people depend on it. If it's outward facing, I would take a look at the third-party libraries and see if there is an issue or not. Chances are there might be. Again, we can go on and on. For instance, Docker. Docker is a fun part because we try to build Docker containers from our applications, right? And what we do in most cases is we pull an image from Docker Hub and we put our application on top of that. So the Docker image from Docker Hub is our base image, and then we install our Java application on top of it, or whatever language you are in. We did this research about 3/4 of a year ago, maybe a year ago. What month is it? Yeah, almost a year ago I did this research, and I pulled a bunch of Docker images, the top 10 free Docker images at that point, and we looked at how many vulnerabilities there are in that Docker image, in that base image. If you pull the node, for instance, it was, funny enough, there were over 500 vulnerabilities. And that is just the node image latest. No specific tag, no specific marker on it, just node latest at that point. What we need to take into account over there is that these images are also based on an image. And the node image in that case was, the node latest at that point was based on a older Debian Jessie operating system. And I think almost all these vulnerabilities were traced back to the operating system layer. That doesn't mean they are necessarily harmful to you, but this is just yet another layer we need to take into account if we need to push Docker images. It's not just your application, it's also your infrastructure, because, well, we base our stuff on other people's stuff. Well, I will not go into this, like, who do you scan? When do you scan when your Docker images? If your Docker images have open source or operating system vulnerabilities? Well, at least half of them do. Let's keep it to that. And we can go on and on if people will find it. But let's go to the hacking part, because I started with that Java application. Remember that the Java application was a struts application, and I always get that thing like, yeah, but nobody's using struts. Well, I somewhat disagree with that. But even though, if you're not using struts, I'm having a let me see if it's stopped. Okay, cool. I'm having a Spring Boot application over here, which in some way has the same vulnerability. It's a Spring Boot 1.55 somewhat thing, and we are using, of course, a vulnerable version of it by design. As you can see, this is 1.5 build snapshot, and you shouldn't be using this build snapshot. Yes, I know, but just to make sure that we found this one in this distro as well. Just let me show you what happens, because it's not just that's particular version of Spring Boot where it's in a sub library. And what we do over here, we are creating a grocery list, and if you see this list, it says, well, it instantiates beans for what is it, 50 cents, and milk for $1.09, etc. Nothing special. If you look at the actual Pojo, it is a name and a cost and an ID and some getters and setters. Fair. This one is the interesting one. This is the repository, and we're using, as you know, if you're a Spring Boot user or a Spring Data user, then you know that if you extend CRUD repository, you do not have to create all the CRUD functionality yourself. Basically, by having that convention in the name, we already have a bunch of stuff. For instance, find by name and find all is there. I do not have to create it myself. I do not have to create these queries myself, which is a plus, because now I can focus on the rest of the stuff. Fun part is we can also create. We can use Spring Data REST. With Spring Data REST, and in this particular vulnerable version, but with Spring Data REST, we can transform that REST a CRUD repository into a REST repository. So that means that by just launching this, I have a REST repo that connects one-to-one to my CRUD repo, or a REST endpoint that connects to my CRUD repo, and we can go. So I can focus on, for instance, my front end. Very, very cool for things like prototyping. So let me just spin this up. And as always, hopefully it works. Yes, it works. Amazing. So let's go to a browser. And I think it was localhost 8,000. I think it's 8080. Yes, and you see I get redirected to my hell browser. Let me just make sure that this is a bit smaller. Cool. So we can actually see it in the full screen. This is a browser to show you how these endpoints work. For instance, if I go to items 1, you will see the first item on my grocery list, which is beans for 50 cents. Great. Again, I can do 2, etc., and I have milk for $1.09. I can also do these search things like find by name, where name is beer, which is one of the CRUD repo functionalities that now is transformed into a REST repository. So I have beer for $5.99. All cool, and this works amazingly. So you probably write tests around this and you're done, right? Not particularly. Let me go into this one. So I will show you this file, my exploit JSON text. Let me just clear it and do it again. And what you see over here is what I can do with these endpoints. I can feed it some sort of JSON. I can feed a JSON in the body, and I will do a curl patch request in a second. And with this patch request, I will feed it this. And as you can see, it's again something weird. What I'm trying to do again here is to call the expression language in Spring, which is the SPL, basically the Spring expression language. So what I'm trying to do over here is, I get a private chat that, hey, I believe the stream is down for some people. I don't know if I am still here, but I see that it's, well, we're still live. No worries. I will continue definitely. Anyway, we see that I'm using the Spring expression language, and I utilize that to create a runtime image. So I will call the runtime, and I will give it a command. Basically, some sort of the same hack as I did with the Apache Struts library. So if I do things like this, let's do the end variables just to make sure again that we're good. Let me copy paste this one. And what you see is I'm doing a curl patch request with this JSON as my body. And in this JSON, instead of command, I'm now calling the env command again. And as you can see is, oh, this is not good.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sure.
Sorry to interrupt. I think the stream is down for some people, so I think we should maybe stop for a second while we try to fix the stream.
I am all good. I'm here for the rest of the day, so I will take it from here whenever you give me the sign how this if this is if you are back online.
Yeah, I'm checking the stream chat as well. Like it seems like it's going on and off. I don't know if some people are messing with the Vermeer thing. Like in the console, I get like a JSON parse exception. Just a bit like.
Yeah, I know. Or you mean in my console? You mean?
No, in the Pine. I don't know if you're on the Pine tool.
Oh, in the Pine. No, I'm not. On purpose, I did not put I did not put the Pine on just to make sure that I do not have a bandwidth problem from my side. That's why
it's perfectly fine.
Just connected to this.
Yeah. So, anyways, if the stream is up for some people, know that we're just working on it, so it may refresh a few times. And I'll just wait for the green light, and then we can kick back on. But I mean, so far, very interesting presentation. At least I've been watching it. It's quite cool.
Thank you. I've got a bunch of other things, so I just wanted to show that there are a bunch of hacks and how we can fix it. Because in the end, we are actually not the red team; we are the blue team, right? We're trying to develop cool stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, I completely agree with the dependency thing. It's really hard to know all the dependencies in your version, especially when you have like a large app. Like we've got an app that has, I don't know, hundreds of dependencies, and dependencies have dependencies. There's just such a thing to actually stay on top of it.
And then it's the part like, okay, how is your architecture? Like if you have one big monolith, you might have just one dependency repository, like you know which version there is. But if you are in a microservice architecture, it's up to the teams to decide how to work with that. So that might mean that one service might be in even another language with a whole nother ecosystem around it. So you have to take care of all these things just as much as your own code, and that's what I'm trying to show over here.
Yeah, it is a great point. Like in so far, the way we've been solving it, like every team has like we're very microservices driven, so every team is kind of responsible for their own dependencies and things. But we tend to discourage pulling dependencies from like things like Maven Central and others. We have our own kind of repository of dependencies that we pull from, and we pretty much greenlight whatever can go in here.
Oh, I see. I made a mistake over here. I can fix it while we're not on where we're not totally live. I think if I re-import this, it should be good. It might be a copy paste mistake. Oh, this is the JSON text. No.
And for people who can see, do let us know in the chat if you can see the stream or not see the stream.
Yes. Yeah, shout out if you can see the stream, definitely.
Yeah. Seems to be mixed responses.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting on green light so that we can kick off.
I'll leave it up to you when we continue. I have a bunch of other hacks, and I have some things to show how to fix this and how you can start fixing this in your own pipeline or in your own way of working.
So I'm seeing a lot of responses for yes, the stream is working. Is it not working for somebody? I mean, I guess they won't hear me asking them the question. But so just judging from the amount of yes that I'm seeing in the chats, I guess we could kick off. Yeah, I guess let's keep
Okay,
going. I'll monitor
cool.
the chat.
Oh yeah,
Let you
yeah.
know.
Just I've got and I've got your chat with me, the direct chat. I have it open here as well. So just
All
shout
right,
out if you need some, or just drop on. I'm cool with that.
sounds good.
So
All right.
let's continue. So just to recap, I just launched a Spring Boot application with a CRUD repo and an annotation to Spring Data REST. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, because this Spring Data REST library has a vulnerability in it, what I'm trying to do over here is, damn, yes, it works, cool. So what I'm trying to do over here is to call a curl patch request. And as you can see here, I give it a JSON body. And in the JSON body, I'm utilizing SPEL, so the Spring Expression Language, calling the runtime and executing a runtime with an arbitrary command. In this case, I am feeding it the env command. And of course, this is on my local machine. But as you can see, if you look closely, you see that I'm firing this up against my item/1, which basically is an endpoint that only is there to show me the items, or show me the first item in my grocery list, remember? So if I fire it up like this, you will see that these are all problems, or these are all stuff which is part of my environment variables. Where is my Scala home? Where is my shell-based that I'm using SDK man? And again, if I'm using this, I can also do things like instead of the env variable, let's create something funny. Let's do let's just simply do an ls. And if I do an ls, you will see that hey, I have some stuff over here. Cool. But I can also do instead of an ls, let's go over here and do a make dir. Shall we call it global summit? So if I do this, you see that it will get back because the spell evaluation exception is there. But if I do the ls part again, you will see that that global summit thing is made. So if this is on a cloud instance or on your offshore account or somewhere in a data center, with this library having this on, I can do a bunch of stuff. I can create files. I can delete files probably. You see that if I'm just using this inside a script or inside a malicious program and fire it up against that, basically that endpoint that is just there for my first item, then we're screwed. And only because we're using the wrong version of the library, because it's already fixed. Okay, let me make some fun of node applications. I have a node application over here, which is a to-do application. Right, and I can do something like buy flowers. If I do this, and I need to speak at a conference. Cool. So I can make a to-do list. The other thing we have here is, yes, I know that StreamYard is calling my stuff. Other thing I can do is here that I have I have an about page, and I don't know if you can see this. Let me just you see that the about page is a static page, which a bestest to do app ever. You see that I'm a great UX designer again. That's not my job, trust me. Luckily not. But this static app, this static HTML is served to you by a Node library, which is the ST library, and ST stands for static. This ST library is a very old one I'm still using, and it has a vulnerability, a path traversal vulnerability. So let's try that. I'm doing this from my console and not from my browser, because the browser interferes with my request. And if I do a curl console, so I do a curl to localhost 8080/public /about.html. I guess I made a typo. Oh, it's not 8080. It's based at 3001. You will see that I have the HTML of my to-do application. Okay, that sounds cool. But now we're going to do a path traversal. So we try to break out of that public folder and see if we can use that. The first thing you should do, or the first thing normally we can do, is doing a dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash, etc., etc. Basically, what we're trying to do is we're breaking out of the public folder, and we're trying to break out of basically the web server, and we try to feed our way back into the root. And if you are in the root and we do dot dot slash in the root, we're still in the root. So we can do this a gazillion times, and we're still over there. If I do this, I see that, oh, it redirects me back to an HTML page, which is about, this is basically my goof to do app. Anyway, the ST library is a real library, and it ignores, or it prohibits me to do a dot dot slash, but specifically a dot dot slash. So if we are a little bit smarter, instead of doing dot dot slash, I can do something different. And if I ask audience, they will, most of the time they will say maybe we could do escaping, but the real point over here is URL encoding. So %2e is the equivalent of a dot. So if I do this, and I try this, say, a bunch of times, you will see this is the root of my local machine, which has a bin, a cores, a dev, and etc. So we are now seeing the directory structure. So that also means that if I'm doing this and I go to etc passwd, you can go into files. And because this library doesn't prevent me from doing a dot dot slash, it only prevents me from doing a dot dot slash, so I can go in. It also depends, of course, like what kind of user you're running this on, definitely. But the point is, this is something we can only use to read stuff, and it sounds like not much, but if you're able to read things, remember, maybe you're having a property file somewhere which contains the credentials to a database, maybe even passwords if you do not pass it into a vault. So it's the beginning of a journey. Now I can start this as my research program to go and see what I can do more. For instance, I can go, instead of breaking out of the public folder, or breaking out of the whole system, let's just break out of the public folder. So if I just do the %2e one time, I'm in the folder just below it, and you see that I'm having the package log.json and the package.json. The package.json, for those who are not familiar with Node.js, is basically the equivalent of your Maven POM file or your Gradle file. So I can call now your package.json, and I see what kind of dependencies you're having here. Or if I want to be sure, because folks are using some versioning, not in this case, but I can do the package log as well. So, and I can use this to see if there are more dependencies that I know that are vulnerabilities, because these vulnerabilities might already be published. If they're published into the open, then I don't know. Right, what time is it? I've got about 13 minutes left. Let's go to something different, because can you remember that Java? I can go on Node applications all day, but that's not fun. But because we're on a Java conference, I started out with this application, right? So this is the Java to-do application I had, where I did the struts on it. So let me sign up on this one. Let me make it a tiny bit smaller. I will sign up with my name and my email, and I will use the password 123456, which is totally safe. Trust me, I work at a security company. 123456. Cool. Sign up. No. So what it tries to do, it signs me up if my workplace wants to work with me. Because it's yes, it's there. And what I can do over here is I can create to-dos. Let me create something fun, something like this. So I can see Pi. I'm using very nerdy. I'm using Python. Let's put it somewhere in 1970 and give it a high priority, because if it's already there since 1970, I will probably be hungry anyway. So I create this, and what you see, it's over here on my to-do list, and it says eat, and then it gives you asking representation of that Python. So what I can conclude from this is that somewhere it's using probably native to ASCII, which is a function within the JDK, to transform that symbol into the ASCII representation. Keep that one in mind. Other things we can do over here is I can create or I can upload files. Yes, I see you, Victor. What's up?
Yeah, is the sound? Can you try speaking?
Yes, hello.
I think the sound went a bit buggy.
All right, I can move my Mac microphone closer.
Oh, nice. That's a very good setup.
You can hear me now or not?
Let's see, they say sound is very bad. Could you maybe try reloading your preferences?
Let me just normally no audio is not.
Seems like it's back. Okay.
All right.
Clear.
All right. If it's back, then we just continue.
All right. I guess yeah. Let's continue.
Oh, thanks for telling me. I love it. Anyway, let's go. What I can do? I showed you that I can do the eat pie thing, and it does the native to ASCII stuff. I can upload zip files over here, and it uses a library to unzip, because in Java there's no such thing as a library inside the JDK that does full zip and unzipping for us. We have building blocks, right? So what if a zip file looks like this? So I am. Oh, remember this one? Keep that one in mind. Keep that one in mind, because I'm doing something with it. So I have a zip file prepared over here, and let me look at that zip file. Zip info zip slip.zip. It's called this way because the vulnerability is called zip slip. And as you can see, the zip file contains two files: a good.txt, awesome, and a dot slash. What we have seen so far was a path traversal thing going to the app/JDK, which is from my Java home. I knew that this was the place where the JDK was, /bin/native to ASCII. So what I'm trying to do by unpacking this, hopefully this library doesn't look too close to that dot slash, and basically execute it. And that's how I override that native to ASCII file within the JDK of my current Heroku instance. That sounds fun. Let's try that. So choose a file. No, I know don't need backgrounds. Where did I put it? I think I put it in demos list. I need to clean up my stuff over here, I see. I cannot find my demo file. Oh, it's not served by name. Demo, Snyk, yes. Java goof. Exploits. And then we have that zip slip.zip I just showed you. So I chose that file and I uploaded. And I uploaded it, and you see that the good.txt, the normal file, is there in the public folder where I expect it to be. What happened to the other one? Or it swallowed the exception and didn't do anything, or it actually executed it. And you are already guessing it. It did the last thing. It basically didn't look at the dot slash, but it blindly executed it and did a path traversal for me. So if I create a to-do now, and I can do eat pie, or let's do something different. Hello, Java Summit, and give it a due date somewhere. It doesn't matter. If I create this, you will see that every line will be replaced with muhaha got you, because that is now basically the native to ASCII function. It's an echo of this string. I can show that, but you probably believe me on that one, right? The point is, I'm just blindly using this. It is already fixed in a later version of that same library, but I didn't know. Okay, let me get back to some concluding words, and I will show you something like, what is the solution? Solutions are based in not just one, but in three. First of all, we need to take care of team culture, or business culture, or company culture. And that means that if we take care of culture, that we need to look into each other's mindsets and respect each other's mindsets. We need to take into account process, and we need to take into account tooling. Going into culture, we work with a lot of different people: developers, security, operations, and management. And we all have a different aspect where we're keen on. We try, as developers, to create new stuff with bunch of frameworks, and we try to push features out. Security, however, they basically care about not getting breached. So if you're pushing things out blindly and they are just working on not getting breached, that might collide. Same is with operations. If you cannot maintain it, an operations person will not be satisfied. And management, what does management care about? Definitely money. So if management would give you some more time as a developer to look at things like your dependencies and have the time to work on that, it's the same as technical debt. And you care a bit about being secure. It's basically just like children, just play along. That is the first step. If we're just in our silo or in our space and we do not care about anybody's other space, we're doomed. Then we go to process, because nobody wants to add new process. If somebody says we're breached, now we need to test everything manually before it goes out, that will probably work for 2 weeks until that manager comes up again and pushes you to fix or to create new features, because, well, that makes money. So the process, you do not need to create no more process, but we're already used to creating software. Maybe we can use stuff to help us in our current process. So not creating new process, but maybe adapt a process a little, or making sure that it fits our process. And that's where tooling comes in. So you need to get the right tooling that helps you during the way of working you already do. And that is the best way of succeeding, not just shoving tooling in somebody's face. Because if you're obligated to use something and it doesn't work, you're like, yeah, true, fun, but I'm just satisfying the system instead of working on security or whatever it is. So what you need to do is, we say DevSecOps in your pipeline, and I don't mean your CI/CD pipeline, but your whole software development lifecycle. Why not test on your local machine? If you see in the beginning over here, while you're coding, we're having unit tests, right? Why not scan for things like your libraries if they don't already have something in it that might be harmful? So before you're actually pushing it to your repository. Once you're in your repository, maybe you can, with every push, you can scan if there is something new in it, because, well, it might be a little while or whatever. Or you can see that you can maybe scan every branch so you do not get worse, because it can be that you have a bunch of vulnerabilities and you're comfortable with a certain level, but you do not want to get worse. You do not want to get new things in. Then within your CI system, like once you have that perfect version you want to go we want to release, sure, you need that gatekeeper. And most of the companies already have something like that, but you need the gatekeeper to say, hey, I'm creating an artifact over here, or I'm creating a Docker container over here. Is this, at this point of release, is that safe? But you're not done yet. Why not, when you go to production, that artifact lives there for a while? And that can be a day, it can be 2 days, it can be a week, it can be months or years. But why not take a snapshot of that point in time and scan that over and over again, say on a daily basis, and get actively pinged, just like in all the other assets, when something is wrong. And then you can still focus on creating more features. But what you're doing is you're getting actively pinged when something is wrong. So you need to know that then you can actually say it's a priority or not. And it's not when it's in production, you're fine. You need to keep checking that. So how can we do that? Well, of course you can. I will demo a little bit of it using our systems, but this is just for the third-party libraries that you need. There's also that little purple dot that you actually is your own code that you need to take care of. But for that thing for that big yellow part, for instance, this was the Spring library, right? And make sure that is these in the exploits. So what I'm doing here, I'm in the root of my system and I'm having the Snyk CLI installed. So by doing a Snyk test, what it does, it uses, in this case, because it's a Maven application, it uses Maven to get the dependency tree, and it compares that only the dependency tree to our database. That is in a nutshell. It's a bit more complicated, but it's querying the database, and it shows us if we have problems in our system and if there is a possibility to remediate this. So we can do that over here, and let's move. Oh, you're already seeing this. So you see there are a bunch of issues over here, and all these issues are there individually because some are good for you or some are not that harmful for you and some are. But what it says over here, if I upgrade the 1.5.5 build snapshot I have to the 2.0 release, I'm already fixing a bunch of issues that came in here over time, like the arbitrary code execution I showed you. Of course, there are also some things that you might not be able to fix, but then you have to make sure that, is there a newer version available? So you can do this on your local machine before you're pushing it to production. But say you are an open source maintainer, and I have that same Spring ecosystem over here, or same application over here. Why not create a new workflow? Create a GitHub action. For instance, we have a bunch of actions available, and of course I do it now in a GitHub action, but we have a bunch of things available for your CI systems as well. So I'm going to Snyk actions, and I'm going specifically, because it's a Maven project, I'm going specifically to the Maven one, because we're using Maven to create a dependency tree, because that's the point that's fair, right? So let's do this. Let's create this one. And instead of doing this, what GitHub suggested me, I'm basically creating a workflow that every push, it will call a Docker container, and it will call the master action from a repository. But it's based on the Maven master. I have to put my my secret in, my Snyk API key, which you can get from your account. And this one I created specifically for this one. What I did, I created a free account, just a freemium account. You do not need to pay for anything of this. A free account. I get the API token for. I created a specific API token for this one, and I can do this. Like here, I can create a service account. I call it Summit, and it will give me an API key, and I can make sure that it's deleted afterwards. I also have a master API key, but I will not use that because you're not allowed to use mine. Anyway, that token is already part of my secret sessions. So if you can see in my secret, I already put in a Snyk token. And by creating this, I'm starting and what I do over here, I said, okay, my severity threshold is high, so only break the build when it's a high severity. And by doing this, I'm committing this, it will now, by every push, it will automatically scan using basically the same logic as the CLI I showed you locally to do this. So now I made sure that the next step in my SDLC is there. What I can do as well, I can make sure that when I do a deploy, I can make sure that it's connected to our system, that we have that snapshot. By doing it manually from my system over here to do a Snyk, is that a Snyk test, what I did locally in my terminal doing a Snyk monitor. And I can do that basically in the same thing in my GitHub action, or as part of a Maven release cycle by including the Maven plugin. Anyway, there are a lot of ways to do this, but it needs to fit your process, right? So getting back to last, I showed you something, and it's now in the meantime, you see it's now working, and it basically gives the same results. If I go over here, it gives the same results as on my local machine. Anyway, going back to the final part. So what we need to do is we need to shift security left, and that means make it as easy as possible from your local machine. So that's the point where you're creating it, doing the security checking already, and make it as easy as possible and integrate it and automate it as much as possible to fit your current process. If you want to know more about that little purple dot, which is called your own code, we created some cheat sheets on Java security best practice, but also on NPM security best practice or other ecosystems, which give you some hands-on to how to look at code, how to review code maybe, which is actually the stuff you wrote. And I want to end with that because we are over time already, but that's because, well, the stream was down, couldn't help it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Les, for this presentation. There's some really good feedback in the chat that I can see. People are quite happy and they feel like they've learned a lot. This was great. I'm not sure we'll have time for Q&A too much, unfortunately, due to the earlier issues.
Yeah. To the outage, I can understand it. That's why my Twitter handle is in the lower left side. If you have questions afterwards, ping me on Twitter. Feel free to ping me on Twitter with any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Brian.
All right.
And yeah, have a good one. I guess with this, we can introduce the next speaker.
Right or not?
So let me add him to the stream. Goodbye, Brian.